Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate this afternoon session, which is on improving inclusivity in our institutions and ECOP. And I think we're all very aware that we're having some incredibly rich discussions about the issues of inclusivity, but we are all looking for mechanisms to make this real. Here we are. So if we have the next slide, please, Sandy. Just a reminder for those of you that are not familiar with this program, Learning for Leaders is a program that is established for Cooperative Extension Directors and Administrators of the lab-grown universities. It's organized by the Extension Committee on Organization and Policy. It's a member-oriented professional development benefit, a networking opportunity, and informal virtual meetings that are archived for the next generation extension leaders. And we hold these 6 to 9 times per year. So today, as I mentioned, we're looking for, all of us are, I think, are looking for tools as we move our systems wherever we are in the US forward. And the program today was put together by a planning team, and I want to acknowledge, next slide please, Sandy, the individuals that have really put this program together. Wendy Powers from the University of California, who is the chair-elect, who will be following me in September. Carl Martin from the University of Wisconsin, Laura Stevenson, University of Kentucky, John Boren, New Mexico State University, Michelle Rogers, University of Delaware, Carolyn Williams, Prairie View A&M University, John Phillips from IAHEC, and last but not least, Shannon Albuquerque, Engel, Colorado State University, who spoke to us a month ago. And so this is a natural progression from the program that Shannon shared with us. Next slide, please, Sandy. So today the program is set up so that we're going to be breaking into a number of working groups, but I want to introduce the topics. I'm not going to introduce the speakers because each of them are going to have 5 minutes and they're going to speak to their particular program or their particular topic. But we have 6 topics: programming, the path forward by Jennifer Scusa, hiring, recruitment, pipeline retention by Shannon again, professional development for leaders and personnel, Dominic Ledesima, and the next slide, support for new and existing diverse employees by Brent Hales, the 1890-1862 relationship, Ray McKinney, and last but not least, collaboration between the 1862s and 1994, Stephen Yarny. Each of the individuals are going to talk to their topic, is that correct?
Yes, we'll turn it over to Jennifer Scusa. Go ahead, Jennifer. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you, Sandy. You can start at any time. Hello, my name is Jennifer Scusa, and I'm from the University of Minnesota Extension. And thank you for the invitation to give an Ignite talk today. My goal is to show how diversity, equity, and inclusion are efforts that are propelling Minnesota 4-H forward. My interest in youth work started when I lived in Key West. I worked with Cuban youth. Some had arrived to the US on makeshift boats and others flew first class, but here it's where I learned firsthand about the diversity of immigrant and refugee experiences. My extension career started in southwestern Minnesota during a big influx of newcomers who were arriving into work in the agricultural area. The Minnesota 4-H program model was the tool that I used to serve audiences who had lived in the area for generations, but also those that were brand new. I later moved to the Twin Cities and I established the Urban 4-H Youth Development Program. Here is where I learned how to do program development well and to do it with the community. When I accepted the role of Associate Dean and State Director of 4-H Youth Development in Minnesota, I rooted my leadership in a clear vision for all Minnesota youth. I'll give you a chance to read it. So what do I stand on? This is the foundational DEI question that I ask myself and every educator in our center. It's a simple yet essential way to articulate what is at the core of our extension education. We stand on three main priorities. The first is program development. Our educators know how to do program development. We wrote a field guide that walks them through the process. We provide training, and it's a performance expectation. Here is the definition of program development that comes from extension that we ground our work in. I'm sure this definition looks very familiar to some of you. I'll give you a chance to read it. The Minnesota 4-H Logic Model serves as a guide for all of our program development in our center. Staff see their work in it. It guides our evaluation and reporting. And also, I'm happy to share a copy with you if you're interested. Our logic model has clear outcomes defined. We want to see youth become passionate learners. We also want to see youth become innovative leaders who are positive change makers. Our logic model does not stop with youth. It commits us to equipping volunteers and youth workers with the skills they need to create high quality, culturally responsive learning environments. The second priority that we stand on is all about our audience. We use a multi-pronged approach to accelerate how we reach new audiences. And by employing an equity lens, we change our organization in the process. To start, we aim to reach first-generation youth. These are young people who are the first in their families to participate in 4-H. We want their first experiences to be excellent, compelling them to stay in our program for years to come. Here are some numbers from 2020. About 6,000 young people join our 4-H program. 56% of them are first generation. You can see they're between 4th and 7th grade. They're very active, and we ask their feedback at the end of their first year experience. We also use an equity lens to eliminate barriers to 4-H participation. We've streamlined our enrollment, we've simplified policies, and we translated key forms into multiple languages, just to name a few. These system changes have improved our access across the state. We also prioritize other target audiences. We pay attention to youth who are in the middle, those who are seemingly doing okay, but could benefit from youth development, as well as youth who are in the margins, those who may be left behind. This has created our greatest organizational changes yet. And here are some examples of special projects in which we have targeted unique audiences. They help us grow in terms of the number of youth that we are reaching across the state of Minnesota. And each of these projects with these target audiences have generated program innovations. So our second priority, or our third priority rather, that I'd like to name is about staffing. Staffing to reach new audiences is essential, and we strategically make short-term investments in local positions to reach audiences for a fixed period of time. Our partners have loved these results and often choose to convert these short-term investments into long-term partnerships. So in sum, I have three priorities that I've outlined: program development, attention to audience, as well as strategic investments in staffing plans. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Archbeck Engel. I serve Colorado State University as an Assistant Vice President for Diversity. and I use she, her pronouns. I'm not going to, Sandy, go ahead and pull up my slide. That'd be great. Thank you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in preamble because January was a build up to this slide and what I'm going to talk about today. One of my hopes as a takeaway for what you will get from these 5 minutes is that there is an extensive amount of literature that could inform us in our efforts to recruit, retain, and promote folks with minoritized identities in the pipeline in agricultural education and in the industry of agriculture. Often I hear the myth that we don't know what to do, that not enough research has been done, and the model that you see here is a summary of 112 papers just in the past 20 years that talk about this pipeline, this recruitment, this retention, and this promotion. So I want to highlight a couple of efforts. And I might have highlighted different bullet points on this slide. And I saw the Chronicle of Higher Education Academy Today article reminded me to highlight one in particular, and that's mentoring programs. So often the Chronicle of Higher Ed article that I'm referring to talked about the need to build cultural competency in the folks in our industry and in our programs who identify as white. And that the Chronicle point makes the point that folks of color are tired. They're tired and they've been doing this work for a long, long time. So the ask in this mentoring programs, I am assuming that y'all assumed that I'm talking about mentoring programs for folks of color intentionally to promote their leadership or support their leadership development. Those are great programs. I'm also talking about mentoring programs for folks in leadership positions with folks of color to build on their competency, cultural competency, so that we can have programs, policies, metrics that allow us to move forward around diversity, equity, inclusion. The other point that I'm going to highlight that, and all of this comes from Romero's best practices paper in 2017, is onboarding. So most folks make the decision about whether or not they're going to stay in a position in the first 72 hours that they are with you. So it behooves all of us to spend more time in our onboarding processes. And at least at our institution, we are woefully behind in intentionally prioritizing onboarding. Usually we're like, hey, welcome, here's some keys, coffee pots down there, by the way, contribute to the coffee fund, and we're glad you're here. It needs to be more intense than that. One of the things that I'm recommending is that you have, at least with the hiring authority and at least with the supervisor, already set up meetings at the 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month points so that you can address things before they become bigger problems. Especially if you are working on your promotion, your recruitment numbers around minoritized faculty, minoritized staff, folks with minoritized identities. I would also ask that in this onboarding process, you identify folks with similar identities that you can introduce these people to. And introduce these people to key people who will allow them to be successful in their positions. As we just submitted an NSF Advance grant, I think it was yesterday, it finally went in. And in the conversations as we were preparing for that NSF Advance grant, the women of color who are faculty in STEM named, I have about 200% more service opportunities on my docket than my other colleagues. I was hired to be a researcher and I want to be a researcher. I'm also interested in this diversity stuff, but let me do my job. So I just want to emphasize that these connections that you're intentionally making, these introductions that you're intentionally making, are tied to the person's position so that they can be successful. Also put in a plug for Cluster hiring, so this is where you bring in a group of folks around a specific idea at one time. And then the last thing that I'm going to emphasize is in the model that you see, figure 1, and I want to emphasize climate, both on campus and in the surrounding community. Often, those of us at predominantly white land-grant institutions and other institutions use the excuse that the climate is not supportive in the community. And what the literature shows us is that folks know where they're moving and they know the job that they're taking. What they say, what the qualitative research tells us is that folks will stay if it is a warm, supportive environment in their job, even if it's a chilly environment in the community. But when they won't stay is when it's a chilly environment in both spaces. So I'm asking us as leaders to control what we can control and make sure that our environments, our climates within our institutions are supportive of these folks being successful. That's my 5 minutes.
Okay, go ahead, Sandy, when you're ready. Cordiales saludos a mis estimados colegas de las universidades land-grant del 1994, 1890 y 1862. Me llamo Dominic Ledesma y estoy agradecido de haber estado invitado a participar en este evento. Special greetings to my esteemed colleagues from 1994, 1890, and 1862 land-grant universities. My name is Dominic Ledesma, and I'm grateful to have been invited to participate in today's event. Go ahead and click. Yep. All set. Before I start my remarks today, I want to make sure I acknowledge the fact that the land upon which land-grant system was established is Indigenous land. You've heard the remarkable story of how our institutions became known as land-grant universities, but have you also heard the remarkable story as to how our institutions are also known as land-grab universities? Today, I will talk about professional learning for leaders and personnel. And before I share some practices and lessons learned from here in Wisconsin, I want to explain why this topic is important, especially within the context of the next year. Redressing historical disparities, adapting to shifts in state demographics, and shifting strategies to address new and emergent issues are among the many reasons why extension must remain relevant and responsive in the 21st century. As public serving institutions, we must center our efforts to shape more equitable, inclusive, anti-racist, and non-biased institutions. And part of this is tethered to meet the need that we have to invest in our workforce and ourselves. Next slide, please. Next slide as well. Thank you. And click the button one more time, please. There you go. Professional learning opportunities are a way to make new investments in our institutions. As institutional leaders, we must provide opportunities and dialogues that challenge us to unpack complex issues associated with privilege, power, identity, colonial practices, race, racism, and others. This requires us to face hard truths, but as leaders, this must not deter us from stepping into these spaces alongside our colleagues, ready to listen, ready to learn, ready to grow, and ready to respond and ready to act. But 2020 reminded us that we still have work to do, and unfortunately this came with tragedy. Race and race relations reappeared as a part of our national dialogue concerning equity and justice, and it's still a pressing issue. And even though there are arguably more people ready to listen and ready to do their part, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the necessary teachings, supports, words, and tools to become better allies and agents of positive change. Part of our mandate for professional learning is to provide and equip them with such. But if you could hit the button one more time, please, Sandy. Thank you. And like many of our 1862 peers, Wisconsin recognizes its own struggles and growth opportunities in setting a vision for equity and inclusion. We recognize that this vision is contingent upon how well we are able to articulate a commitment that supports sustainable progress and impact. In Wisconsin, we have reimagined opportunities to change behavior, starting with changing our behavior in how we acknowledge and respond to the complexities of issues that continue to limit our institutions in a variety of ways. Here are a few examples. We established the Office of Access, Inclusion, and Compliance in October of 2019. Through this unit, we espouse a support services unit providing language access services, resources, trainings, and leadership on these issues. But following the death of George Floyd, we hosted a talking and reflection circle. This image was what participants saw when they signed in. It wasn't a town hall, a workshop, or a training. It was an opportunity for colleagues to collectively express their grieving, feelings, reflections, and experiences. It was a place to listen and a place to be heard. Over 350 colleagues, that's over half of our institution, of our employees around the state, showed up because this topic mattered to them. Next slide, please. The month after, our dean and myself hosted an institution-wide dialogue on decentering whiteness. I talked about the challenges embedded within a predominantly white institution, situated and rooted within the literature. And I also talked about and the many ways that it provides us with both challenges and opportunities at our institution. The discussion topic challenged our colleagues, and our colleagues challenged us as leaders as we were co-hosting this institution-wide dialogue. In response to these two events, we also developed a call to action that reinforced our strategic commitment to inclusivity and anti-racism work. The call to action outlined 9 new initiatives that would jumpstart efforts and to tackle a specific issue or to create a new opportunity. Colleagues wanted more. So of the 3 days that we held in our December statewide conference, we focused one of those days on the topic of advancing racial equity and injustices. Feedback from evaluations showed that this was the most well-received and impactful day of our 3-day conference in December. Next slide, please. So here are a few lessons that I'll share with you. Anti-racism is now an irremovable component of DEI work. And this is exactly what last summer showed us, that we could no longer use the broad brushstrokes of diversity and inclusion and being champions. We also need to center anti-racism work as a part of our strategic agenda. And we found that many more colleagues want to be engaged with professional learning on these topics, and that it is our job to create opportunities that both challenge and support them. 3, our leaders within Wisconsin Extension recognize the need to be partners in learning with our colleagues, even when this means exposing our own vulnerabilities of talking about these issues in very public forums with our colleagues to be able to better understand them in ways that we need to move forward. 4th, the creation of OAIC has helped move our division toward a more strategic and coordinated equity praxis. This is critically important for having a model that supports anything from employee resource groups to create supportive spaces for colleagues around particular identities, as much as it pertains to providing coaching and consultation to support more equitable practices within our programming efforts. And finally, innovation around issues of equity, inclusion, and anti-racism must always start with acknowledging the hard truths. Next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, one more. And I'm going to leave you with a final thought. While resources that advance work on issues of equity and inclusion help establish our credibility as administrators, it is our humility and transparency around issues of equity and inclusion that help establish our credibility as leaders. I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Dominic. Brent.
Please, next slide, please. So today, I'm grateful to be able to share some thoughts on how and why we should provide support for diverse employees in Extension. These strategies don't exempt us from constantly trying to improve our efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism, but are part of a larger deliberate strategy to create meaningful change in a system that has historically suppressed support for and subjugated diverse employees and citizens. As noted in previous presentations, the history of the land grant institution is rife with examples of land grabs, forced labor, and unequal access on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and so forth. And so it's necessary for extension, in order for us to be successful, to look at ways that we can provide opportunities. Under USDA under USDA NIFA guidelines, extension is expected to provide services that reflect the population of the communities in which we serve. History demonstrates that many extension systems struggle to provide those services to underserved populations, particularly in urban settings. And extension systems across the country are largely white due to existing recruitment strategies and unequal requirements for those positions. Next slide, please. The future of extension is based on looking forward. Extension risks becoming irrelevant should it continue to focus on an ever-shrinking rural white population versus urbanizing and suburbanizing populations who have little or no direct connectivity to agriculture. Ultimately, creating a supportive environment for diverse faculty, educators, and staff comes down to the reality that, number one, culture matters. Number two, we appear tone deaf at best if we don't act. Number three, we'll leave some of the best and brightest talent and resources on the table to failing if we fail to do so. And number four, we need to do it because it's the right thing to do. Penn State Extension, our vision statement states that we will be a transformative educational institution to premier cooperative extension program in the United States and a world leader in non-credit education and consulting. This cannot be realized if we don't take deliberate steps to address the underlying conditions that limit our potential and create discord in our system. So what am I proposing? A review of job descriptions, a revamping of trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism, creating consultative committees, including staff, educators, agents, and faculties, creating committees of communities of practice and affinity groups, as well as Beyond Civil Rights Initiative and training for leaders. Our review of our job description is it's a systematic process with human resources in the lead, and it examines job descriptions for potential biases, our recruitment strategies for attracting diverse candidates, structural barriers to diverse candidates, both in the application phase and in retention, as well as what we can do to increase our opportunities to assess the success of our existing employees, particularly those diverse employees. Next slide, please. We're also reviewing trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion, where all employees in the college are required to undergo training on DEI within the first month of their employment. Additionally, much of the curriculum has been outdated or doesn't reflect current technology or materials. So we've determined that our current training can't be salvaged, therefore it's being completely scratched, and we're restarting with diverse voices in its construction. And that effective training, though, is not a panacea, but it'll go a long way. Next slide, please. The resources that the committee is using to put this together as reference material come from other states' trainings, recommendations of an outside consultant, resources available on e-extension, and resources available through Penn State's Office of Equity Education. Next slide. We've also created consultative committees. These are committees that create opportunities to engage employees from all of our job families in the decision-making processes. And when done intentionally, they represent the broad diversity of our extension employees. It requires deliberate efforts to build ownerships in the group and provides both upstream and downstream opportunities for communication. And these, we have faculty, educator, campus-based staff, campus or community staff, administrators, and it's based on meaningful engagement. So how do we get these to succeed? We meet with them monthly and or quarterly, depending on the request and the need. They own the process. We have project-driven approaches where leadership development is core, It also is focused on building trust, challenges status quo, and it's something we must do is take the information that we've received and do something with it and report back. So it's a reporting to, reporting from, and it's a collaboration. Next slide, please. We've also instituted communities of practice where this provides opportunities for employees to engage with one another on the basis of their shared mutual interest. This may include those with a specific group or those interested in working with those groups, but not necessarily closed to outsiders. It may serve both as a support, but also a consultative committee function. We offer financial support and is provided to those groups, and it also serves as an ombudsperson role. And we have communities of practice of Latinx, LGBTQ plus IA, as well as urban serving. Our affinity groups are a little bit different. They're close to those employees that are based on a shared characteristic, but it does serve as a support role. And we do provide financial assistance to these groups. Examples include our African American, Native American, American Indian, foreign-born, Latinx, LGBTQ plus I, and so forth. We've also launched a project called Beyond Civil Rights, where we have a bare minimum which we're required to provide funding, but it goes beyond that and is focused on looking at issues that are regional or local. And it has the greatest return on investment, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be immediate, because it takes time, energy, and leadership. It requires buy-in to the process and the product, and it assesses both current challenges and opportunities. It also allows for understanding the context of the local or the regional efforts that are being undertaken. And that's a multi-phased approach, and I'll describe the phases one by one. Next slide, please. Phase one is typified by stage setting, which brings together locality-specific groups to discuss and to share, and it asks participants to identify challenges to their success. These may be institutional or individual challenges, but affirms perception as reality, and it creates a framework for addressing those challenges. Next slide, please. Phase two, once those challenges are explored, identifies specific actions that can be taken to identify solutions and identifies what is to be done, when it's going to be initiated and completed, who's going to own the process and the product, what resources will be needed, and how. Not just how it's going to happen, but what are intervening steps that will need to happen in order for our ultimate goal to be realized. Finally, next slide, please. Phase three is the report out, which identifies recommendations of the committee and how it should be assessed. It identifies missing pieces of information that's needed and creates follow-up steps for achieving larger goals. And it serves as a planning round for the next Beyond Civil Rights, because this is not a one-time shot, but rather planning leads to implementation, leads to evaluation, and it's this continual cycle. Lastly, we provide training for leaders. So we're conducting this internal to extension for leadership. Includes readings on leadership, on race, ethnicity, on becoming an anti-racist, engagement with all efforts, and it requires ownership of everyone. It also requires having crucial conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's part of our strategic plan, 2021 to 2025. We have regular speakers, webinars, and it's also part of our annual conference. And most importantly, it's repeated early and often. I want to leave you with the thought that support for diverse employees starts at the top, but too often in a large bureaucratic organization, those at the top feel like those below them exist because of those at the top. At Penn State, we believe just the opposite, that it's what happens at the local level and supporting those at the local level that enables us as leaders to do our jobs. And our job is to make them successful. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent. Let's move on now to Ray, and I apologize, Ed, I left you off the list when I introduced the 1892s. Next slide, I guess, Sandy.
Right. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Emery McKinney. I am Dean, Extension Administrator at Virginia State University, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Ed Jones, who is Associate Dean and Director of the Cooperative Extension at Virginia Tech University. The first slide, it is up. So go back to that slide, the first one. Building the Transcontinental Railroad was a long, grueling, arduous task met with many challenges. Yet through a bold vision, strong leadership, and committed workers and believers in the potential of this understanding, the task was completed per the coming together of the East and West rail lines at Promontory Point Summit, Utah in May of 1869. Similarly, the building of strong, productive relationships between 1862 and 1890 universities is challenging yet necessary work. Four components of a successful relationship partnership that we are talking about today are relations matter, mutual respect, common vision, common purpose, shared governance, and constant communications. Next slide.
As we talk about the first key to great 1862-1890 partnership, next slide there, Sandy. Relationships matter, and we talk about that a lot in Extension when we are inducting new employees, telling them the relationships they build with their faculty around them, the community they work in, their stakeholders, their supporters. And that's just as important, if not more important, in the relationship between the two institutions. Embedded in that is mutual respect. And it's really important that we think about that in building that relationship. It's being aware of and understanding the history and the origins of each institution, acknowledging the differences, and understanding the evolution that each has undergone. It also means that we constantly seek to support each other as we work with legislators and stakeholders across the Commonwealth.
Next. It is critically important for leadership to identify what are the main goals, initiatives, foci that are essential and important to the collective success of cooperative extension, and which support and drive their organizations as well. This task cannot be done in isolation and must involve key leaders, or we would say legitimizers, from both sides, 1862 and 1890. Doing so will come with lots of noise and pressure internally and externally. Pressure to continue to do it the old way, to say this is not us anymore, and to resist change. Yet if done right, involving the right mix of people, there can evolve a common vision and common purpose, one which two leaders can sanction, embrace and incorporate across extension, and should continually drive and emphasize from their positions of authority.
Next slide, please. Shared governance. Our universities have different processes, policies, and priorities. Recognizing that is the key to joint decision-making and governance of the organization. The key priority is that what is best for the entire organization, as Ray has indicated earlier. That has to be the starting point for all conversations. We seek to have consistent implementation, language, and understanding so it is clear to all in Virginia Cooperative Extension that we're going in the same direction. It's not one university going or the other. In fact, it's important that, so important that our joint leadership team meets at least weekly.
Next. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. This cannot be overly emphasized in building a strong 1862-1890 collaboration or partnership. Messaging must be reflective of a shared and collaborative leadership model. It cannot involve dual or coded messaging, where employees, clientele, and supporters of Extension can see, and more importantly, sense a division in leaders. Both partners must meet and talk constantly about what they see as the good and the bad of the Cooperative Extension organization. Difficult as it might be, open, honest dialogue is an essential ingredient for long-term success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Ed. We will now move on to our last introductory talk, which is by Stephen Yarny.
Ani Buju, Odaman Quaindish Cost, Magizian Dodom, Waganaxing Odawa, Lansing, Cross Village, Indonjaba, Harbor Springs, Enda. Emily Proctor, Tribal Extension Educator. I live in Harbor Springs, Michigan. I've been with Extension a little over 12 years. Thank you much for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Yarny. I'm the Land Grant Director at Bay Mills Community College, a tribally controlled college and land grant institution. Geographically, out the window behind me is Whitefish Bay on the eastern end of Lake Superior. We're both very, very proud to be here today representing our colleagues here in the state of Michigan. So at this point, we're on Indian time, so relax and join us around the fire.
Wonderful. Miigwech, Steve. Skude, fire in our Anishinaabe-Moan language. A fire is very symbolic and important to, at least in my teachings and many of my elders, to bring unity, to speak to each other. It's a place of deliberation, collaboration, ceremony, and personal journeys. You may see such logos, you may see such items, you may actually be invited to attend a fire if you're working with a variety of tribal communities across Indian country. However, for the purpose of today, this fire represents multiple relationships, multiple journeys that we've had for many years to get to this point, right? Michigan and Anishinaabe share common cultural practices and language called Anishinaabe-Moan. All tribal nations in Michigan share common ties to the land. Tribes have their own unique structure of government as well as political identities that vary from village to village. So, in working with tribal nations and with Michigan State University Extension in our 1994s, we, and Steve, please take us to the next step.
Seated around the fire in the graphic that you see before you are the four land grant institutions in the state of Michigan. Michigan State University, Keweenaw-Bay Ojibwa Community College, Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College, and Bay Mills Community College. Additionally, the smaller logos that you see around the fire represent the 12 tribal nations in the state of Michigan. 5 located in Upper Michigan, 7 located in Lower Michigan. These tribal nations represent the Odawa, Chippewa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi people collectively making up the Anishinaabe Nation. You do not see any 1890s around the fire. We do not have any 1890s in the state of Michigan, but we certainly welcome any 1890s moving forward who would like to join us on this journey of meeting the needs of all people in the state of Michigan.
So what we've tried to do here in Michigan is build a sustainable, integrated Michigan intertribal land grant extension system. And what does that mean? We improve the impact of extension, education, and research activities in partnership with tribal nations and tribal communities and their neighbors. We continue to train, develop, and aspire to employ more individuals to work with our tribal communities. We continue to build our competence as a team to bring our authentic selves to our work, being accountable and reliable to others, including our tribal nations, tribal communities, and ensuring we're doing all we can to be transparent in all aspects of this initiative. There are multiple ways of knowing and ways to engage with tribal nations. We must be willing and able to become comfortable within a less defined, fluid environment, thus the Michigan Land Grant Fire, the land grant family, which resides in our homelands of Michigan.
We've discovered over the past few years that we really enjoy one another. We're not doing this work because of buzzwords. We're not doing this work because it's the in thing to do. We're doing this work because we enjoy working with one another. And we've discovered that when we work with one another, we are able to produce a much more important, successful product to the folks with whom we are working. We found that we've also discovered that we are friends, we are relatives, we are neighbors. We've eliminated any barriers to us working together in a very honest and open way. We've understood one another, we trust one another, we've identified opportunities to collaborate with one another. We learn from each other, the streets go in all directions. We've discovered that we have an awful lot to teach one another as well. So as we continue on this journey, these are some of the very important concepts that we've embraced as we continue to develop the Michigan Intertribal Land Grant Extension System. What we'd like to do now is share a few quotes that Emily and I identified as we talked about this topic for this afternoon. And in our opinion, these quotes really exemplify some of the important concepts that have driven the work to this point and will continue to drive it as we move forward. One of the quotes that I'm going to share with you is a quote from a former president at my college, Bay Mills Community College. I was sitting at the dinner table one day with Mickey Parrish, a former president here, and Patrick Cudney, Associate Extension Director at Michigan State University. We had met many times before this. We've talked about different ways to collaborate. We worked on grant projects together, but it always seemed to be, grant project to grant project. And we felt that we wanted a much deeper collaboration, a much deeper relationship than that. One of the things that Patrick did at that meeting was he offered to provide resources that would allow me to spend a significant amount of my time working on this particular project. There's a lot of money placed on the table that morning. And I remember our president at the time, as we walked away from that meeting, saying, I guess Michigan State University is serious about this now. So that's one of the quotes. I guess Michigan State University is serious about this.
And another part of our efforts in building partnerships, Steve and I, hit the road. We traveled around Indian country in Michigan. We visited 11 out of 12 federally recognized tribes. We touched base with a handful of our Native organizations in various cities around the state as well. And on one of our trips, we met with a tribal leader near our capital. They were there for another business meeting, and he made a few moments to talk with us. And one specific piece that stuck in our minds, the quote that is everlasting, is, "We just want to be at the table." So to us, that spoke volumes from an elected official telling us what their needs are, just to be at that table or at that fire.
Thank you, Emily. And another quote that I'm going to share with you this morning is from my colleague and friend, Emily Proctor, member of the Little Traverse Bay of Odawa Indians. The quote is, "All of us are in a relationship. We need to find a way to be in an equitable relationship with tribal nations. Uphold tribal sovereignty by upholding tribal knowledge, traditions, values, and self-governance." So those concepts of sovereignty, tribal knowledge, traditions, values, and self-governance are very, very important driving components of the land grant family here in the state of Michigan, as we seek to meet the needs of tribal nations, tribal organizations, and tribal citizens in a very equitable and sustainable way.
Thank you much, Steve. And to wrap up our part of this discussion, I'd like to share a quote from my longtime coworker, who we've built a wonderful open communication about this work on Miles with tribal government, and who was one of my former regional directors when I first joined Extension, my associate director, Patrick Cudney. And this quote has stuck with me and us for a long time, and Miles has only exemplified this. "Why are we doing this? Because we can and should. Tribal nations and colleges have a right to be there. We assist them with providing those resources and programs based on their needs. Miles will continue regardless of additional external funding. So Chi-miigwech, Patrick. And with that, that is our presentation.
Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And Emily, I apologize for not introducing you properly, or at all for that matter. My sincere apologies. And thank you to Steve.
Chris.
And thank you all of the 6 groups for a wonderful introduction for, I think, the next session, which is going to be putting us to work to really think about this more deeply. And I'm going to pass over to Wendy Powers to take us through the breakout procedure. So Wendy.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to all of our speakers. They were amazing and hopefully got everyone thinking a little bit about what we can do in our own institutions. The next part really is about action steps that we can take at our own organization as leaders and steps that we can take together as ECOP. You know, as we were putting together this session, I was reminded of having heard from a colleague who's been in the Cooperative Extension System for some time, that the individual had heard these conversations so many times that we've circled around what it takes to be a multicultural organization. Unfortunately, that individual hasn't really observed any real change. And it brings me physical pain to hear that. We need to change. Recent events, the racist acts of January 6th, underscore the need that we have to make change, that racism, sexism, genderism persists throughout our country and our community. So as a group of directors, we've got the opportunity to start at home and make change within our organization. Dominic, I think, did a great job underscoring the importance of professional development. And no doubt professional development is a component of change and important for each of us so that we better understand the past, as well as be able to see the systemic practices and policies that prevent us from being those multicultural organizations that Shannon talked to us about last week. But professional development alone is not enough. We've got to go beyond that and commit to anti-racism as individuals. And we need to remove those system barriers that prevent us from becoming the organizations we should and can be. So we're going to move into multiple breakout groups. You'll be with a small group of your peers in those breakout groups. And while I know we could spend hours engaging with the presenters, asking questions and learning more from them, the focus of the breakout groups is on 2 questions. The first question is, what will you commit to doing in your organization over the next 6 months? What action will you take? And the second question is, what will you commit to doing over the next 2 years? Now, in each room, there will be a facilitator. It may be one of the presenters. It may be one of the organizers of this session. The role of the facilitator is to keep us on time and keep us focused on those 2 questions. They're not there to lead the discussion, and they don't have to take notes. The session, in addition, is not going to be recorded, and there won't be any report out that follows. We'll reconvene here at 25 minutes past the hour, and we won't have time to report out. Instead, what we're going to do is put out a follow-up survey to everyone and collect your answers. And in that follow-up survey, the planning team has also committed that we're going to follow up with you and see how your commitments are coming as we go through this year. Because we really want to, at the end of this, be able to have our colleagues say, in 2021, I finally saw change. So with that, we're going to move to our breakout groups, and I hope everyone has rich discussions. Thanks again so much to our presenters for helping seed those conversations for us.